Hey everyone, welcome back to Crimson Gasp. Today we've got some mysterious and spooky Reddit stories that will keep you hooked. Whether you're relaxing or just in the mood for something eerie, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're aiming for 500 subs and I know we can get there soon. Let's get into chilling Reddit horror stories. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts. I thought they were just stories people made up to explain things they couldn't understand. That was until I moved into an old apartment in the city. It wasn't much, but it was cheap, and I needed a place to stay after a breakup. The apartment building was old, almost ancient. The creaky wooden floors and narrow hallways had a charm to them, or at least, that's what I convinced myself of when I first moved in. Everything was fine at first. I had unpacked my things, settled in, and felt at home. But then, around the third night, I started hearing things, scratching at the window. It was faint at first, almost like the wind, but it persisted. The wind could never sound like that, could it? I chalked it up to nerves, maybe just the sounds of an old building. But then, the knocking started. At exactly 3 a.m. every night, there would be 3 knocks on my window. Not a tap, but a heavy knock, like someone trying to get my attention. I lived on the 12th floor. No one should have been up there. I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me, so I ignored it. But one night, the knocking came at 3 a.m., just like clockwork. This time, though, something felt different. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a bird. The knocking was too deliberate. I tried to ignore it, pulling the covers over my head and pretending to sleep, but my curiosity got the best of me. I went to the window, peeled back the curtains, and looked out. Nothing. I thought it was just a bird, or maybe the wind. But then the next night, it happened again. Each time the same 3 knocks. By the 5th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood in front of the window, staring at the empty street below, waiting for something. Anything to give me an explanation. That's when it happened. I swear to God I saw something move in the reflection of the glass. At first I thought it was my own shadow, but it wasn't. It was a dark, tall figure. It stood just behind me in the reflection, not moving, just watching me. I spun around to look, but there was nothing there. I turned back to the window, my heart pounding, and the figure was gone. I ran to the door, checked the locks, and then checked the balcony. There was no one. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there watching me. It wasn't until the 7th night that I truly understood what was happening. I had gotten into bed, trying to fall asleep when I heard the scratching again. But this time, it wasn't just at the window. It was coming from inside the apartment. I froze. The sound moved, shifting to the walls, the floorboards, the door. Every surface seemed to be alive, as though something was scraping its way through the entire apartment. I was too terrified to even move. The scratching grew louder, closer. I couldn't breathe. And then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a voice, faint, barely audible, coming from the dark corner of my room. "I'm right here." That's when I bolted. I ran out of the apartment and never looked back. I haven't slept in that apartment since. I don't know what it was or who that figure was, but I do know one thing: I never want to see that reflection again. I'm an experienced hiker. I've been to some of the most remote parts of the country, camping in the deepest woods, hiking the highest peaks. So when I decided to go on a solo camping trip in the Whispering Pines forest, I wasn't worried. I had everything packed, a solid map, and my survival skills in top shape. I set out in the afternoon, making good time through the dense forest. The air smelled fresh, the trees towering over me as I walked deeper into the woods. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and I knew I had to find a campsite soon. I set up my tent near a stream, started a fire, and settled in for the night. At first, everything was peaceful, the kind of silence that only nature can provide. But as the night wore on, I began hearing strange sounds. It wasn't the usual rustling of leaves or the calls of nocturnal animals. No, this was different. It was faint at first, almost like whispers carried on the wind. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination, or maybe the wind playing tricks on me. But then the whispers grew louder. I could hear distinct words, though I couldn't make them out. They were like low murmurs coming from all around me, as though someone, or something, was watching me from the dark. I stood up, grabbing my flashlight, and shined it around the camp. There was nothing, no animals, no other campers. Just the quiet rustling of the trees. That's when I heard it. A voice clear as day coming from behind me, whispering directly into my ear. "Don't look behind you." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct in my body told me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Slowly, I turned around, flashlight shaking in my hands, and there, standing at the edge of my campsite, was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its face was pale, almost gray, with wide, empty eyes. It was wearing ragged clothing, its skin stretched thin like it hadn't eaten in years. Before I could react, the figure vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, like it had never existed. I didn't stay to investigate. I grabbed my gear, left the fire burning, and hiked out of the woods in the middle of the night. I didn't look back once, and I never returned to those woods again. I live in a small apartment building in the city, a place that's seen better days. It's not much, but it's cheap. For a guy working 2 jobs, it's perfect. The tenants are quiet, and I rarely run into anyone in the hallways. But there's one apartment across from mine that always seemed off. The door was always closed, and I never saw anyone come or go. At first, I thought it was just one of those places where people keep to themselves, but the longer I stayed, the stranger things got. It started with noises. Sometimes I'd hear muffled talking, but when I listened closely, it was always in a language I didn't understand. Other times I'd hear pacing, like someone walking back and forth, but the footsteps didn't sound like normal shoes. They were heavier, deliberate. I could hear them at all hours of the day and night. I never saw anyone in the hallway. In fact, I'd never seen the person who lived in that apartment. But the sounds kept getting worse. One night, I was coming home late from work, exhausted. It was around 2 a.m. I was about to turn the key in my door when I noticed something strange. The door to the apartment across from mine was slightly ajar. This had never happened before. I could see the faint outline of a figure inside, but the room was dark, and I couldn't make out any details. The sounds were louder now, like low mumbling, and the pacing was rapid. Back and forth, back and forth. I knocked softly at first, unsure if anyone was home. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder. Still no response. But the sound of the pacing stopped. I waited for a moment, then pushed the door open slightly, just enough to peek inside. The room was dark, but I could make out some furniture, nothing too strange. There was a faint smell in the air, something musty, almost decayed. But what caught my attention was a calendar on the wall. The dates were crossed off, but what made my skin crawl was the last date marked. Tonight. And on that date, in bold red letters, was one simple phrase: "I'm watching you." I don't know who lived there or what was happening in that apartment, but I never stayed another night in that building. I packed up and left the next day. I don't know if anyone else has lived in that apartment since, but I'm not sticking around to find out. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more creepy stories. See you next time.